Hi everyone, it's me Gaming Do, and yes, after almost 3 long years, we are finally doing my South Park Season 2 ranking. It has been a long time since we did the ranking for Season 1, and now that I finally watched through the series again, I'm finally ready to once again rank South Park, but this time we're going to be ranking the second season. Now, the general consensus is that the first 3 seasons are kind of weak compared to the Golden Age, and we'll see that a little more in season 2. We'll see if I agree with that statement as we go into the next season of the show. And yeah, without further ado, why don't we get into number 18, which I think is the weakest episode of the season, which is City on the Edge of Tomorrow. My least favorite episode of season 2. And one of my least favorite episodes in all of South Park. Why? Because only in its second season, it's a clip show, basically. And I think they were kind of trying to parody clip shows in a way. But still, even joking about it, I just do not like clip show episodes. They annoy the shit out of me, and the plot besides that was just really boring. Basically, it was the kids just getting eaten on the bus by this big pit. Um, I just... I don't like this episode at all. It's just the most boring episode of the... There's probably 2 or 3 episodes I hate more from the later seasons, and one from actually the golden era that I dislike, but this is probably like the 5th or 6th worst episode of the entire show for me. This, in my opinion, is the worst episode of the first 3 seasons of South Park, and I can totally say why. It's just because it's the most boring episode in all of South Park, in my opinion. I do not like this episode at all. Do you want to see Stan and Kyle bitch and moan at each other for an entire episode? I didn't think so. Well, then I would avoid Prehistoric Iceman if I were you. The main feeling I get from this entire episode is just the hate of the big argument between Stan and Kyle in this episode. It just feels very petty, very annoying and stuff like that. It's not why I come to South Park. It's played pretty comedically, but in all seriousness, it's not funny because of it. It just leaves you with a bad taste in your mouth, and that's the main thing I get with this episode. I don't hate this episode or anything. I don't think it's nearly as bad as City on the Edge of Tomorrow, but I don't really get any enjoyment out of it either, so it just leaves it at the 17th spot for that. Oh, wow, an episode about gnomes? Okay. Well, I like that Tweak sort of gets his first big role in the series. That's pretty cool, but other than that, it's just a pretty boring episode. I'm not interested in what the gnomes have to do in the episode. They're underpants gnomes, which is extremely mildly funny, maybe, but I don't know. I just find most of the episode boring. I kind of find the underpants gnomes a little tiny bit annoying and stuff like that, so it's just not an episode I go back to and enjoy very much. Okay, Spooky Fish, you are nowhere near as good as last season's Halloween special. Last season's Halloween special, Pink Eye, is my favorite episode of season 1. Spooky Fish, on the other hand, is in the bottom 5 for me for season 2. And it's... I mean, it's not a bad episode. It's the first episode that I can actually say I probably enjoy more about it than I don't. But I still think it's kind of predictable. It's like a spooky fish is killing people and sort of everyone suspects it's Stan. Okay, that's not the most unique plot ever. I do like how Sharon is kind of disgusted and like trying to defend Stan, I guess you can say, but I don't know. I'm just not a huge fan of this episode. It's not bad. I think there is more good than bad. It is a relatively funny episode, but it's not as good as most of the season. 14 is Clubhouses. So the basic plot of this episode is, Stan and Kyle see that Wendy and Bebe think that guys with clubhouses are super cool and stuff like that. And they decide to build a clubhouse themselves. I think the scenes with Sharon and Randy are the best parts of this episode. With him calling her really mean names and stuff like that. I think it's freaking hilarious, and them arguing and stuff like that. It's different than the scenes in Prehistoric Caveman or Prehistoric Iceman and stuff like that. Like, it felt more petty in that episode, where it was played purely for comedy here. I found it hilarious. The sort of fight between them and Cartman and Kenny and them building a clubhouse is pretty funny. I actually kind of like this episode. I think it's pretty good, but it is brought down a little bit by... I'm not honestly not too big of a fan of the scenes with Cartman and Kenny, besides the whole Cold War, basically, between them and Kyle and Stan to see whose clubhouse is better. I like that, but most, like, all the college kids basically going into their clubhouse, I don't really find that funny. So I will put Clubhouses at 14. It's not a great episode in my opinion, but I'd say overall I do enjoy it. Okay, so people waited months for this twist. And they were teased by an episode that I actually think is better than this episode. Cartman's mom is still a dirty slut. Had a huge cliffhanger from the first episode, basically. And it turned out Cartman's dad is his mom because she is a hermaphrodite, which they retcon in season 14 to realize that it's Scott Tenorman's dad who was actually Cartman's dad. So if you pay attention to the season 5 episode, Scott Tenorman must die, that means Cartman killed his father. That's pretty dark. But we're focusing on the episode itself, and it's good. It's mostly pretty funny. I like the scene, the way Kenny dies in this episode, where basically he goes to plug the generator back in and he gets electrocuted, I think is pretty funny. I like the whole scene where they're in the hospital and stuff like that. And yeah, I enjoyed this episode overall, but it's not one of my favorites, and the twist wasn't exactly the best twist in the world. It was pretty funny, but yeah. It's not one of my favorites. Okay, so this is a long name. The Mexican Staring Frog of Southern Sri Lanka. I think this episode, for the most part, is very funny. My favorite parts are all the Vietnam flashbacks of Jimbo and Ned, and basically it's like a big freaking fun fair. That's pretty freaking funny. I like the prank the boys basically play on Ned and Jimbo about them creating a fake creature for them to hunt that's a Mexican Sri Lankan frog, basically. That's pretty cool. I don't remember a heck of a lot about the rest of the episode. It's a little bit forgettable in certain aspects, but I do like the main plot of the episode, and my favorite part is the Vietnam flashbacks from them. That is actually a great big fun fair. That was freaking hilarious. I love that scene. This one, it's the episode with "I'm a cop and you will respect my authority." That's one of the most popular Cartman quotes of all time. It comes from this episode, and I like it. I think it's a good episode. I think it's a little bit overrated. I think a lot of people think it's one of the best of the season just because of those scenes. The main plot of the episode is actually basically about a book fair, kind of. I mean, I liked going to the book fair when I was a kid. It was cool. I was one of the kids who would rather actually get the books than a lot of the toys they had, because a lot of the toys they had were just stuff that would break in a day. So I'd actually rather get, like, the Guinness Believe It or Not books or the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books. But anyways, that's enough about me. Let's talk about South Park. It's a good episode, and the scenes with Cartman as a cop are the best part of the episode, but I'm not really a huge fan of the scenes with the book bus and stuff like that, so it lands right around the middle-ish lower part of the list because of that, so I'm not a massive fan of this episode, but it's pretty good. Cow Days. This is a funny episode. Especially the scene where Cartman rides that bull and basically Kyle and Stan make fun of him and gets the bull really angry and stuff. It's freaking really funny. I like basically the whole concept of the episode where it's about this fair basically coming around and the boys are trying to ultimately win these Terrence and Phillip dolls. I remember when I used to want to win, guess what? At the same kind of place, I wanted to win a Cartman doll. I'm serious. At the same sort of fair that they had at my local fair. Actually, it was the boardwalk at the Wildwood Boardwalk, but there was this game where you could win this big Cartman. I didn't win it, but surprise, my mother won it for me, which is one of the best memories I had at Wildwood, and it was freaking awesome. So same concept, I actually won a Cartman doll there. That was pretty freaking cool, and that's the main thing I think about this episode. So it actually is pretty memory driven for me, as it reminds me a lot of going to the boardwalk, but I really like this episode. Do you want to see a full Terrence and Phillip episode? Actually, yes I do. And I quite enjoyed it. Number 9 is Terrence and Phillip Not Without My Anus. And this episode is basically just like I said. It's a full episode of Terrence and Phillip. It was supposed to be what was supposed to be. Cartman's mom is still a dirty slut. They egged it on who was going to be Cartman's father just to show this episode first. And I like it more than that episode. It's so cool seeing a full Terrence and Phillip episode all to yourself. It's the universe they're in, the portrayals of Canada. I'm going to tell you as half Canadian, they're not exactly that accurate, but it's freaking harmless. It's not offensive. Anybody who gets offended by those jokes is just really sensitive, honestly. But, no, it's freaking really funny. Especially the scene where Scott wants Terrence and Phillip to get cancer, and they're like, "You want us to get cancer?" And And this is some of the fart humor that actually works because it's so freaking out there that it's hilarious. And yeah, I love this episode. From here on out, these are episodes I really love. So season 2 as a whole is actually a pretty good season, and you'll see where it ranks at the end of the video. But Terrence and Phillip, Not Without My Anus, awesome episode. Conjoined Fetus Lady comes in at number 8. And the main thing I like about this episode is actually kind of its message. That everybody in town basically treats the nurse special because she has a conjoined fetus on her face. And she doesn't really want that. She just wants to be treated normally. They have whole presentations on her. Everybody has a sort of fake conjoined fetus on her, and she's honestly creeped out about it. And I like that message. But I also love the side plot of the boys going around the country in dodgeball tournaments, especially the ending where they go to China to have the world championship. This little school in Colorado goes against an entire country. That's just so freaking funny. I love that part. This episode in general is really funny. It's got a really nice message. So what is there to hate about it? I think this is a really good episode. An episode where somebody steals a song from Chef and then he basically becomes a prostitute. That is so his character. And that's why I find this episode freaking hilarious. Chef 8 is a really funny episode. But of course, my favorite part of this episode is the way Kenny dies. The way Ozzy Osbourne just eats his head off, sort of parodying the way Ozzy Osbourne used to eat bats' heads off. It's freaking hilarious and creepy at the same time. And this is just such a laugh riot in my opinion. I love this episode. So, when you were a kid, did you ever go to the planetarium as a class trip? I know I did. Twice. Once was in first grade. We went to actually the high school that used to be my local high. Actually, I went to a technical high school when I went to high school, but the local high school in my area used to have a planetarium, and in first grade we went there on a class trip and saw that. And we also went there in fourth grade to see it. I can tell you for a fact, none of us were so glued to it that we just want to go there day after day after day and be mind-washed. But the way they portray it in South Park is freaking hilarious. This episode is an absolute laugh riot. My favorite part, though, is when Cartman does his Cheesy Poofs commercial. It tries to basically be the kid in the Cheesy Poofs commercial. That's freaking hilarious. But it's just such an out there concept that I find it freaking hilarious. So Roger Ebert should lay off the fatty foods is a really funny episode. Now we're on to the top 5, which starts with Summer Sucks. You want to know what I like about this episode the most? It's the change of scenery. Like 95% of the South Park series takes place in snowy winter Colorado. But, in Colorado, it's not always snowy. And in this episode, they portray that as the boys finally have their summer vacation. And I just love the change of scenery. It's also a very funny episode. Like the scene where they basically build a mud snowman. And at this point, we're pretty much in the dead middle of winter where I live in New Jersey. So, summer does not suck. Please come back, summer. So, It can be warm again. I can go out. Right now, it's actually in the mid 50s, so I'm perfectly okay going outside, and I will go outside today, but um, in the middle of winter, you don't usually want to go outside. Next week, we're getting a foot snowstorm, which is freaking lovely. I love getting foot snowstorms. Oh, I so do. But, anyways, enough complaining about that. This is one of the best episodes of season 2 of South Park. Love the change of scenery, and it makes it into my top 5. Ike's Wee Wee. This episode is basically about Ike getting circumcised. That sounds a bit weird, but in concept, it's actually freaking hilarious. I like when Kyle basically sends Ike off on a train to Nebraska. That's hilarious. I like how the boys think that Ike is basically gonna get his thing cut off completely when it's just a circumcision, which I'm not gonna get into anything else besides that. But the best part of the episode, this is where pretty much Mr. Mackey's peak is, in my opinion. This is where he goes off and says, drugs are bad. You shouldn't do drugs, okay? And, let's just say he's a hypocrite, and he completely goes against his rules later in the episode. That's the best part, though. I love this episode, and it's probably in my top 50 episodes of the entire show. Ike's Wee Wee is hilarious. On a road trip to Nebraska for Christmas, Cartman decides to bring Kyle, Kenny, and Stan with him, and basically go see his family for Christmas. But when his uncle escapes jail, he brings one of his buddies with him, which turns out to be one of the biggest serial killers in human history. Or gang of serial killers. Charlie Manson. And, well, totally unrealistically, he basically has a Grinch-like miracle where he sees the point in everything and he turns into a totally great person and loves Christmas and stuff like that. His heart grows 3 times its size, just like the Grinch. That is hysterical. I love that, and that is why it's my 3rd favorite episode of the season. It is my 2nd favorite South Park Christmas special, and I absolutely adore it. Of course I'm putting Chef's Chocolate Salty Balls in the top 2. Why wouldn't I? This is one of the funniest early South Park episodes out there. From Chef making his chocolatey concoction, to even the scenes that don't involve that, and it's just about the Sundance Film Festival coming to South Park. All the scenes in this episode are freaking hilarious, bringing to one of the funniest episodes of the entire show. And, I mean, what else can I say? Except that there's one episode I like more. And my favorite episode of Season 2, coincidentally, just like the first season's best episode, is named after a disease. Coming in as my favorite episode of South Park Season 2, it's chickenpox. Chickenpox is one of the best episodes of the entire show, in my opinion, not just the original 3 seasons. This episode is freaking hilarious. From Cartman singing the ghetto song, to the boys finding out that their parents are trying to get them chickenpox, so they get revenge by bringing a freaking prostitute to get on all their items and get them sexually transmitted diseases. It just it's freaking hilarious. The Urkel blanket, as you can, or the Urkel sleeping bag, as you can see there. Chicken pox is one of my favorite episodes of the entire series. It's so freaking hilarious, and it's better than any episode in season 1, in my opinion, even Pink Eye. I just love the shit out of chicken pox. I said it 100 times already, but it's one of my favorite episodes of the entire show. And with that, we have officially ranked the entire second season of South Park, which I believe is the longest season of the entire show, so that's that. And, well, let's get on to the overall ranking. So, my least favorite episode is, City on the Edge of Tomorrow, which is one of my least favorite episodes of the entire series for just being so boring and being a clip show, which I don't like at all. And my favorite episode being Chicken Pox, which is freaking hilarious from start to finish with some of the best jokes and shocking humor of the entire series. I love that episode. But what about the statistics? Where does this rank against season 1? And what is the overall score of the season for me? Well, guys, in my opinion, and the results come in that I like season 2 better than season 1. For the main fact that I feel like the humor got more mature, and with that had overall better jokes. I feel like the first season was maybe not as shocking and didn't have as good of humor as later seasons. I can definitely say that season 2 doesn't have as good of humor as like seasons 4 through like 14 or 15, but I definitely think it's better humor than the first season, especially with the episode Chicken Pox. But overall, that leads me to give South Park Season 2 a 7.5 out of 10. And with that, this video is over. We have officially ranked the entire second season of South Park. Next up, we will be ranking the entire third season of South Park. We are going to be doing Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, giving that a review after Season 3. And I don't have too much more to say besides that. I hope you look forward to South Park Season 3. There's going to be way smaller of a gap between Season 2 and Season 3. Instead of it being 2.5 years, it's going to be 1 month. As in March, you will officially see my ranking of every episode of South Park Season 3. And I hope you guys look forward to that. It'll be out in March, and that's about it. Gaming Jew here. See you later. Bye.